I'm super pumped to have Michael, a core contributor from Marinade, on today, and we're going to go deep on LSTs, everything to do with LSTs and Marinade, and the environment on Solana with regard to LSTs. We're even going to chat about Lido on Ethereum a bit, and as well as the MNDE token. So everything LSTs today with Michael. Welcome, Michael. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you, Louis. Thank you very much for having me on the podcast. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, today you're not wearing the chef's hat. I kind of wish you were, but I know with the headphones it doesn't make sense. So for those who are not familiar with Marinade with yourself, could you give a brief intro to how you got into crypto and with Marinade?
Sure thing. So I got to crypto quite late, I would say. It was actually late 2017, I believe. I got in with a vision to put in $1 to make 5 when I'm out. So really to invest something. Then at the start of 2018, there was the big crash. So actually the story is that I got out to this Mauritanian desert. I spent there 2 weeks without any signal. And then I came back. It was this spring 2018. I came back and realized like 50% of my worth in crypto is just gone, poof. So then for a while, I was like, oh, it's like another scam that I jumped on. Let me take a pause here. I'm not going to trust it again. And then 2 years down the road, I looked at crypto again, but this time not from the investment perspective, but rather like what can it do on the technological level, like what it can do, like let you really get under the hood, I would say. And I started participating in a few hackathons. I played with the craze of the DeFi summer on Ethereum, so I tried all the DeFi protocols back then. But then it was this moment when I realized it's getting kind of expensive. I needed to get up at 3 a.m., 4 a.m. in the morning with my alarm clock set for me to get up at the right time when the gas prices were low enough for me for the transactions to go through with like reasonable fees. And I was like, I'm not sold if this is the future of finance. So I started looking into alternatives and I saw Polkadot. So I used to run a validator on Polkadot, participated in a few hackathons back there. And then a few months later, really, I ended up trying this new chain I didn't know anything about. And I clicked the swap button. And in half of a second, it was confirmed. I was like, what's going on here? At really a fraction of a cent. And I was thinking something suspicious, so I swapped back and forth, and it worked. So this is how I discovered Solana. It was February 2021. And me and a bunch of other friends met over Discord and saw this hackathon to be happening. We signed up. And as I saw many liquid staking protocols from the Polkadot Kusama ecosystem, I felt like it's a nice match for Solana back then when the validator set was much more constrained than it is today. And I felt that I can really preserve this magic moment for all the other people on Solana by building something sustainable on the infrastructure level. So that's why we decided to give it a shot and build Marinade at the hackathon. That's basically how it started.
Amazing. Yeah, it's surprising how many projects I interview started at hackathons or hacker houses. So yeah, something seems to be working with those efforts. And I completely accord with you about that first moment of swapping. I think for me it was on Sabre, and yeah, I also swapped back and forth, and I was like, what's going on here? This is just so much faster. Okay, so I think you mentioned LST, if I heard it correctly, and so there'll be some folks on the who are listening who are like, what's an LST? So let's get to that next. What's your sort of brief primer on what an LST is?
Right. So actually, before Marinade, the way you can stake your soul, so that means you participate in the network, like putting your voting power on a specific validator to put them in charge, to give them some weight in the consensus protocol, in the mechanism, is by staking your soul. And previously, you would stake your soul by locking your soul in the staking contract, and it's locked there. You cannot do really anything with it. The whole innovation of Marinade's liquid staking, where we started, and the coined term LST, it's liquid staked token, means that you don't need to be locked with your soul anymore. So this liquid staking token means that you can actually put your soul to a smart contract, and then you're given in return like a voucher, a deposit token, which can be called different ways. In Marinade's example, it's the MSOL. So MSOL is the liquid staking token that represents your staked SOL. And now this MSOL over time accrues in value. So it's getting all the staking rewards in the form of accruing value over SOL. So MSOL/SOL accrues in value over time. And at the same time, you are completely liquid. So with your MSOL, you can use it to go to participate in the Solana DeFi. You can provide liquidity with MSOL. You can borrow against MSOL. It's a perfect collateral, so you can put it in DeFi. It gets interest over time, so it gets about 7% interest per year. And at the same time, so it's productive, and at the same time, you can use it in DeFi. You can borrow against it and do stuff. You can enter Solana position not into plain SOL, but again to this interest-bearing token MSOL on Coinbase. And what's more, when you're ready, you can also exit your staking position. So from your MSOL, from this staking token, you can just trade it for any other liquid token, which practically you're exiting your position without the need to wait for multiple days for the cooldown period, which is again tied to the regular way of Solana staking.
Yeah, we don't hear it as much these days, but it used to be a big buzzword. I think definitely in 2021 and 2022 probably as well, which was capital efficiency. And I think an LST is a really good example of like capital efficiency. Just to drive it home, you're essentially you're staking and you have a token that you can use in day to day and for earning yield outside of the staking. And it's sort of happening concurrently or at the same time, and in a very convenient way in that it is accruing. The MSOL is accruing the staking yield. What are some challenges that you see around LSTs? And I guess I'm thinking in the direction of, like, you mentioned that you can use it in DeFi protocols. I think there's always a drive or a wish that there's more things to do with LSTs. So yeah, can you speak a bit about like the challenges of actually kind of bringing MSOL into the ecosystem?
Sure. So I would say one angle to look at it is that it's kind of a chicken and egg problem. So for the LST adoption, for MSOL adoption to increase, you need to have the DeFi use cases. So it's really MSOL is supposed to be liquid, and you want to be liquid if you have a use case for your staked SOL. Otherwise, you just let it there staked. So you need to have a specific use case for unlocking this staked SOL liquidity to do something with it, be it providing some liquidity, so just getting some additional rewards out of providing liquidity, or as I was saying, you would put it as a collateral to deposit a collateral, and then you can borrow against it. So it's this ask question around: do we need more adoption in the LST ecosystem, or is it vice versa that we need the DeFi ecosystem to be more mature, to have more opportunities than what to do with your MSOL in there? So this is tough to answer for sure. So that's one. I would also name, because if you look at it from the global perspective, there is about 400 million SOL staked in total on Solana. That's like the global picture, of which about 12 million SOL only, it's liquid staked.
Wow.
Right? So to put it in perspective, still 98% of all staked SOL, it's staked the native way. So it's locked on a validator, and you don't have any liquid staking token, and you cannot do anything with this liquidity. It's just there. So only 2% of it's unlocked so far. And as I was saying, one, it can be that the DeFi is not that mature, but two, it might be that actually delegating Solana stake is super easy compared to other ecosystems. For you to stake ETH, for example, you need to spin up your own validator. Let's say before all liquid staking options on ETH, you needed to spin up your own validator. You needed to have exactly 32 ETH, not more, not less. And you needed to be the one who would run the validator and then stake it this way. So this is just a user experience nightmare compared to Solana, where you can have as little as one SOL and you can, within one click, really delegate it to one of those 2,000 validators, and boom, as long as the validator is performant, you're getting staking rewards, and you're done. So the whole need for having this liquid staking solution, to me, the value prop is just not that high as on other chains, but it's actually because Solana is that well made, because from the get-go, it was thinking about delegating the stake as well. So it's easy to delegate as little as, for example, one sol. So that might be the two main differences. How to get the adoption going, if that was one part of the question. I believe that at the moment, there is no slashing on Solana. So the worst that can happen to you as a staker is that you can lose on additional rewards. If you stake to a validator and the validator goes either on offline or they charge 100% commission on the staking reward, you as a staker, as a delegator, get zero yield on it. But that's the very worst that can happen to you at the moment. So there is only, from this perspective of stick and a carrot, there is only carrot for now. And eventually we need to stake. So once we have any slashing system, once we have some penalty for the validators and for the stakers delegating to them, then it might kick off another wave of adoption of solutions just like MSOL.
And that's because having your soul in an LST would essentially protect you from being slashed or suffering a penalty if the validator that you were staked to didn't perform well.
Yes, that depends on, basically, if we're talking about the LST category at large, we need to know that there are specific LSTs that, for example, delegate to a single validator, right? There are specific tokens that the delegation strategy means that there is this single validator. And so the token represents stake to the specific validator, actually. With MSOL, on the very opposite, if you stake with MSOL and Marinade liquid staking, you delegate currently to more than 100 validators that are picked by the best performance. So in this case of MSOL, yes, the risk is spread around. It's spread across more than 100 best performing validators. So you are not putting everything in one basket, and you are diversifying your risk around. So this would work against slashing. Even today, if a validator goes offline and you don't find yourself and you're staking to them, you are at bad luck. With MSOL, if one of those 100 validators goes down, Marinade automatically undelegates from this validator and delegates to another one, but still the damage that was done is like 1/100th of, because the basket is just so spread around, if that makes sense.
That does make sense, yeah. And also with Solana, just one other distinction that makes it, I think, more or maybe less attractive to go into LSTs is also like the unstaking is much shorter than, for example, when I unstaked on Cosmos recently, it's like 21-day cooldown period.
Right.
What is it on Solana?
In Solana, it actually depends on what part of the epoch you trigger, but it can be as fast as tens of minutes, really. If you hit it at the very end of the epoch, you can unstake the traditional way within minutes, tens of minutes. It can go as long as about 2 days. That's the worst case.
Okay.
So from a few minutes to up to 2 days.
Cosmos.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. And last thing that I often hear, so when I chat with people about LSTs, I often hear like concern about smart contract risk, which I think we'll cover in a bit when we talk about Marinade native, but also tax implications. So can you share a little bit about like how the tax handling, and of course, we're not accountants and it depends on your specific jurisdiction and where you live, but can you speak a bit in general terms about like how the tax implications are different for an LST versus the native token?
Right. Yes, correct. So I would say there are some advantages and some disadvantages to choosing LST over regular staking. Starting from the drawbacks, for some countries, the jurisdiction is today not clear enough to give a proper guidelines. I would say that's really a concern for the crypto at large. But with staking in general and comparing regular to liquid staking, for some countries, since it's not described, the funds or the holders in there consider depositing SOL to this liquid staking contract and getting this voucher redeemable token out of it, MSOL. They might consider it as a potential tax trigger. given that their jurisdiction might feel like it's technically a swap.
Mm-hmm.
There are like discussions and communications about this, that it should be considered as rather a deposit, which technically it is a deposit. It's just like if users deposit tokens into a liquidity pool and they get a liquidity pool token back that represents their deposit. So it's very much same thing. So that might be the drawback for some countries, since it's not unclear. It's kind of vague. This might be the potential trigger there. What's the advantage, though, is that with regular staking, every epoch on Solana, so every 2 days, you're getting staking rewards, which are accrued on top of your initial staked balance. So you're getting more and more SOL on the staked balance. With LST, just like MSOL, when you enter MSOL, you have the same amount of MSOL over time. Only the value of MSOL compared to SOL increases with all the staking rewards in it. So you started with 100 MSOL today, and in a year you still have 100 MSOL, but this 100 MSOL is now worth 6% more of SOL than when you started, if that makes sense. So this makes it capital efficient, because you could technically only treat the exit position to be the tax trigger, and you can save on all those epochs. So you can save all those 2 days not to be the potential tax trigger there. So it has pros and cons, I would say.
Got you. Okay, that makes sense. So let's move on and dive in a little bit more with specifically what you guys have been shipping with Marinade since that hacker house or hackathon you mentioned. So what are the sort of key points of Marinade?
Yeah, sure thing. So back then in February 2021, we really made a concept. Actually, it almost started like a strange joke when there was this like Russian, Argentinian guy from States, Singapore, Slovak, Czech guy, and they all met over Discord, and we tried to build something together. And we participated in this hackathon, building this prototype of liquid staking. So since then, because there was this Solana summer, I would call it, Marinade was contacted by close to 100 of investors asking to invest to Marinade. And we talked about it for a long time and then decided not to take any VC money. So Marinade is completely bootstrapped. There is no VC funding. There was no private public token sale, nothing like this. And thanks to Solana and Serum grant back then, we were able to get from the prototype to something functioning in a production grade quality. And on August 2021, we released Marinade to mainnet as the first liquid staking tool to be out there. So we got it out with the main audits supporting the release. And that was basically it. Starting there, within a few days, we got about 100K SOL staked through Marinade, and within a few months, we got from 0 to close to 6 million SOL in TVL. So it was just huge back then. And that's how it all started, really, because previously, before Marinade, the only option for you was to pick a specific validator and lock your SOL on this validator. With Marinade, you could unlock your SOL and use it in DeFi, so to compose it, and 2, you would not bet everything on this specific validator, but Marinade would spread it across those 100 best performing validators. So you would support decentralization behind the scenes, and for you yourself, you could get some gains on top of the staking rewards and some utility on top of it. So we saw quite some adoption. Many people loved it. They also loved the idea that Marinade is completely bootstrapped, is this DAO first approach, which very much resonated with the community at large. And I think that helped us really to beat this, I would call it almost like Goliath coming from Ethereum ecosystem, where we were battling together with this giant coming from ETH with all this money in their treasury. So yeah, that was pretty much it.
Yeah, got you. And since those days, I don't know exactly when you guys released this. I think it was a bit earlier this year, because I mentioned the smart contract concerns that some people had, and you guys have a product for that. So can you share a bit more about the Marinade native?
Yeah, exactly. So that was kind of a eureka moment for me, since I've been talking to many stakers over those 2.5 years, really. And probably the number one concern for all of those was, oh, there is this smart contract risk, right? And Marinade's liquid staking is based on the smart contract. So even if Marinade got it audited, now it'll be by 5 different entities, and Marinade has been up there and running for 2.5 years without any hiccup, knock on wood. There is a smart contract, to put it blunt. And with any smart contract, nothing is 100% sure and secure. So for many people, and also why I think that the adoption is not that big of liquid staking on Solana, is that there is this smart contract risk, while it does not give the regular staker much of a benefit in terms of yield or anything, or UX, something like this. So that's why we saw maybe we can achieve what we came here for with Marinade, which is making sure that Solana is as secure and decentralized as it can be. We wanted to help Solana to be decentralized and secure through staking. We just started with liquid staking since we felt this is the answer, and everybody would be liquid staking in the long run. And we found out that it might not be the case, especially when Solana, it's delegating solids just so easy, as we talked about. And 98% of solids still stake the regular way. We found out that we might have a solution of it for those people. They don't care about DeFi, they don't want to touch it, they don't want any smart contract risk, but they would love to decentralize their staking or diversify their portfolio, or they would love automatically stake with the best performing villagers to support the censorship resistance of the network, but they just don't want any smart contract risk at all. So we got back to the drawing board and built something that's literally only possible on Solana, to tell the truth. And we call it Marinade Native. And what Marinade Native does is that it leverages the built-in system for the regular native vanilla staking, just like people were used to from the very start. And in the regular Solana staking, to put it blunt, when you stake Sol the traditional way, you are given 2 main authorities. You have the withdrawal authority that authorizes you to withdraw Sol back to you, to your wallet. And then you have the stake authority. And the stake authority authorizes you to change the delegation, who will be the stake delegated to. So the whole concept of Marinade Native, it's actually quite plain and simple. It's that you as a staker get to keep the full custody of your Sol. You get to keep the full custody, and you get to keep the withdrawal authority. And you put Marinade as the proxy on the stake authority, so that Marinade handles the stake on your behalf. It would split your stake into 100 pieces and put it on 100 validators. And Marinade would actually pay off for all the rebalancing cost. So it would cover, if there is underperforming validator, then it would get the stake from the validator, put it on another one, all automatically done, and without any smart contract exposure. So this is just super powerful. It's been out there not even 3 months. We've seen people with more than 2.5 million Sol to use Marinade Native. And we really feel that that's what can unlock the institutions, the funds, the high net worth individuals to stake the safe way, but make Solana more decentralized and secure. So that's the idea behind Marinade Native.
And with Marinade Native, are you still receiving an LST when you're staking through, or it's akin to like a smart traditional staking, as in smart as in it splits it up?
Yeah, there is no token at all. So
Okay.
it's actually just like the normal staking, because it is the normal staking. We just split the stake into 100 pieces and would stake it to the validators that Marinade chooses. But you get to keep the withdrawal authority. Actually, in your wallet, you, just like if you're staking Sol, you see in your wallet the stake account, like who are you delegating to. So even now, when you're using Marinade Native, in your wallet, you see 100 of stake accounts, like little pieces of your Sol, and you know how much is delegated to what validator, and you see it all in your wallet, and you are completely in control. So at any time, you can revoke the access from Marinade, and you can withdraw Sol because it's completely in your custody, and there is no smart contract in between. So this is like a big benefit and big innovation that we've made with Marinade Native.
Yeah, so they hear it, like no excuses. If you're concerned about smart contract risk, then go with Marinade Native. Otherwise, the traditional MSOL is a great option. Let's then move on to another feature that you guys shipped around the same time, if I recall correctly, which was directed stake.
Right, exactly. So yeah, that was, say, like a few months back before Marinade Native, but the concept of directed stake is that generally before there was directed stake, when you stake with Marinade, it would automatically go to this index of best performing 100 validators on Solana. That was it, that was the deal. For some stakers, or even some validators that are staking to their own, this option would mean that they might not be able to support their favorite validator anymore. So that's why we allowed to provide an option. Either it's automated and we put it on those 100 best performing validators, or you select a validator, and as long as it's fitting some criteria, some delegation criteria, then the Marinade scoring algorithm would put some extra weight, some extra power with its delegation on this specific validator. So basically today, if people are doing directed stake, they can choose a validator and support this validator from the Marinade stake pool for them to get more staked this way, rather than supporting the whole index. So for some validators, they can choose to decide to go with a specific validator, and then the Marinade would stake with the specific validator and give you MSOL in return that you can use in DeFi.
And did you guys see that really being something that validators would use more to direct stake to themselves, or more for the individual stakers who want to support specific validators for whatever reason?
Yeah, we've seen in terms of numbers, before this feature was out there, and there was no Marinade Native back then, so the liquid staking was about 4.5 million SOL back then. And when we introduced direct stake after 2 months, it was sitting around 6 million SOL. So we saw some jump. And we also saw that there were validators actually running promo for their stakers to turn SOL into MSOL and direct stake to them. And they would bribe them with some additional incentives, and they got quite clever with the mechanics. But we've seen that, yes, for some validators, this has been working. And under all of this, it's this concept that Marinade delegates 60% of its TVL through the algorithmic delegation strategy. So the top 100 performing validators, 60% is delegated to them. And the 40% rest of it is then delegated via MSOL and MND token votes. So basically the MSOL holders and MND holders can decide where 40% of Marinade stake would go via voting. So that's like underneath it.
Got you. It reminded me a little bit when you guys were releasing that new feature, and I think you were using Tribeca originally. It reminded me a little bit of the curve situation where you had like gauges, and different like LPs were like using their curve tokens to point rewards to certain gauges. Super nice. I love the design. Have there been some changes since the initial release? Because when I was initially playing around, it was on Tribeca, but what I last read was something to do with Realms. So what's the latest there?
Right. So yes, the Marinade DAO infrastructure originally started on the system called Tribeca, and the DAO recently migrated the infrastructure, the governance infrastructure, to Realms. So at Tribeca, I would describe the change with the idea to simplify things. So we expected that the people might be more active, that they would go and vote weekly on multiple validators, changing it around. Yeah, really looking at the curve system. We believe at the end of the day, we saw about 200 to 50 participants in the whole voting system. So it just took too much of our resources to justify so little people participating in it. And we even saw that we built it for multiple votes, and then 90% of participants just vote with single validator. So we wanted really to simplify it. So that's why we did this merge, so to say. And now with the directed stake, it's possible when you're doing liquid staking through the Marinade app. And at the moment you do liquid stake, so you turn either SOL to MSOL or you deposit a stake account and you want liquid staking MSOL out of it. You pick a specific validator and it counts automatically your locked MND in the governance and your MSOL balance, either coming from this very transaction or your any historic MSOL balance. So there is a snapshot system that each day scans for your MSOL balance. It can be on your wallet or employed in DeFi. So it's actually quite a robust system to understand where the MSOL of yours is employed at the moment. And then we would assign weight based on this MSOL balance and then based on your locked MND in realms. And this weight you can then apply to vote for a specific validator. And then depending on how many people vote, you would have some effective power over some amount of SOL that's coming from the Marinade pool to be delegated to the validator of your choice. So we put this all together, but both your MSOL balance and your MND can vote today for a single specific validator, just to simplify things and to make it more clear for people to understand. Since even now it's maybe complicated enough, but we wanted to simplify it.
Got you. And in terms of like users, are you seeing a similar number on Realms as you saw on Tribeca previously?
More or less, yes.
Yeah.
Still, most of the people go for the automated way of staking, since that's the main value prop of Marinade. If you want to do solo staking, you usually end up what you've been doing at the start, so you don't need to change from regular staking. So once again, this 388 million SOL on Solana, it's staked the way that it's locked to a specific validator and to one, not many. So that's the way how it's done. And you would keep on doing this. So if you want to use Marinade, the main driver is that you don't need to choose one validator, because it's hard to choose one from the set of 2,000 on the network, right? You don't know who performs. And maybe today they all seem to perform, but tomorrow they go offline. The day after, the validator change commission from 5 to 100%. And we've seen this happen a lot. So that's why some people are like, let Marinade handle it. In the long term, it's probably the best play, and the numbers show that it's the best play. And we pick the index of top 100 validators.
I've got a bit of a curveball for you. If and when Fire Dancer releases, will Marinade sort of split up the stake across different validating clients to also sort of improve like resilience, or how would you approach that?
Yeah, we very much think so. So at the moment, the decentralization at Marinade has few factors that are then combined into scoring what validators to choose, right? One is, and probably the number one reason why people would use Marinade for decentralizing the network, is that Marinade skips the biggest 30 validators and supports rather the mid and long term of the validators. So it skips this group called the security group or the Nakamoto coefficient. Those are the biggest validators that together form 33% of SOL stake. If we sum it up, that would be 33%. So Marinade skips those. And then it also looks at the geographical concentration. So for example, at the moment, Marinade most likely would not stake with the most concentrated data provider out there. So if many people choose to, for example, run their validators with, it used to be Hetzner, right? Many people chose to run a node on a Hetzner server, and there were times where 20% of all Solana validators went down because Hetzner just shut down. So Marinade automatically takes care of it, and Marinade looks at what data centers are around the validators. If there is some concentration, it would give much more score to those that are not that
not
crowded,
part of that,
so to say. Exactly.
Not part of that centralization factor.
Yeah, trying to spread it around, and be it in the future, it'll also be on the country level. So for example, now the United States alone account for about 30% of all stake, which is also somewhat concerning. So once again, Marinade would make sure that more is spread around across the country in some underserved regions, for example, like Asia or even Africa, maybe one day.
Got you. Okay, so a new validator client would essentially just be like another data point in your process for, choosing validators.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now our biggest concern is one, the stake. So the size of the stake on the existing validators. So as I was saying, Marinade skips the biggest ones to support rather the smaller or medium ones, but performant ones. And then to the geographical concentration. So we would much rather see the stake not to be concentrated in any country or in any city, any region, to spread it around. And then down the road, with Firedancer coming up, we'd love to see more client diversity, because when Marinade started, and even up until a few months back, it was 100% run on the Labs original client. So now it starts to spread around. With Firedancer in it, we might have a third client out there. So we like to see this diversity happening for sure.
How pumped are you for Firedancer?
A lot. I mean, it's just a beast, and I'm super looking forward to what they come up with this breakpoint, actually, to see how it progressed, because last time it was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, the Kevin Bowers presentation was the presentation of the whole event last year.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on a little bit to the way that Marinade, the incentives are designed. We spoke about the directed stake, but can you speak a bit more generally about the incentives around Marinade?
Yeah, exactly. So as I was saying, Marinade had no VCs, no investors. So the initial token split at Marinade was 7.5% for the initial team and 92.5% for the DAO, basically for the DAO to decide how to incentivize further programs, how to do grants, how to fund the further development of the protocol, and so on. This year, around January, we redesigned the whole system, how the token is working both internally and externally. And I think this is a great innovation. So previously, we've had within the team, we had those linear unlocks, like linear vestings, which are quite usual in the space, where you have some team tokens allocated and you get to vest it in 2 to 4 years, monthly, so to say.
No.
That's one default, how it is internally. Externally, most protocols resort to liquidity mining to be their primary incentive, how to drive some growth and TVL and usage to their protocol. So they use liquidity mining to be the proceed. We thought about it, and at the start of this year, we redesigned the system. So internally, we said no more vesting for the team. No more vesting for the team, no more linear time vesting. It just didn't make sense for us. It felt like the team would vest the tokens, even if it didn't perform. So technically, it would dilute with new MND tokens out there. It would dilute the existing holders. And this is not fair in the long run. So we said internally, let's freeze it. There will be something that we call a milestone budget, which is a budget of certain MND amount, but the team can only unlock it once reaching specific TVL milestones. So if we don't get to grow the TVL, we don't get to unlock this MND budget. So coming from this time-based performance, we switched it to this performance-based. So now if no TVL growth, basically no unlocks. And also, if we get to grow quite rapidly, quite fast, and we get to grow Marinade 10 times in a short amount of time, then it's completely fair not to wait 4 years for the vesting to happen, because we made the goal. And if we're looking at 100 million SOL TVL to be the ultimate goal, if we reach it sooner than in 4 years, it's all good, right? And it goes well together with the existing MND holders, because it's aligned. More TVL means more fees to the protocol. That means more fees to the treasury, and that increases value for MND holders. So we did this switch, and we waited actually up until this month. So from January we started, And this month, Marinade has reached 8 million sold TVL, which was the very first milestone. So we are happy to reach it, and we'll start to vest over 12 months to the team this milestone budget. And then we'll go and ask the DAO for another budget for another milestone that will sit at 16 million sold. So we need to double again the TVL to be able to unlock additional MND. So that was this change internally. And externally, we started at Marinade with liquidity mining for sure. It helped us to go from 0 to 6 million sold TVL, but then the TVL line kind of flattened over time. So once again, in January, we thought we might make this better. And instead of doing liquidity mining, we started doing, we call it open door, and now the MND incentive program. So basically what it means that if there is no TVL growth by the partners or by the new stakers, we would not, again, unlock new MND for the people out there. So there needs to be some TVL growth to get some additional MND to the market. So that's also how we change it. We draw the baseline. This is where we are with TVL. Only if we get to grow it, then we would release additional MND. But with liquidity mining, it felt to us that we've been only feeding the existing users, and it has not really helping Marinade to grow. So these were like the two main initiatives and changes in the perspective how to align the incentive with our community, with the DAO, with the existing holders, to be way more aligned than we used to be before, both on the internal side with the team unlocks and external side coming from liquidity mining to this new way of incentivizing TVL growth, actually.
Yeah, I really like that actually. I mean, the classic death spiral is when the emissions are just supercharging, and then everyone is selling because the token is constantly being devalued. And it sounds like you're pursuing like a very much an approach where, as an MNDE holder, I guess as you said, the incentives are very well aligned because you're holding, and your token, you may expect it to go up if the protocol is performing well. Because sometimes you have that situation where the protocol is performing well, but the token is still being kind of losing value, because part of the good performance is actually related to the fact that there's like a token cost and a token emission in order to onboard the users. Sounds really cool. Did you guys build the token like the team milestone investing? Is that like a bespoke product that you guys have built, or is that something you're using with Realms?
That was already built in Realms, thanks to Bango, who already worked on this like investing thing in there. So just because the whole infrastructure has been moved to Realms, it made sense for us to make it at the very same place for everybody to see in all transparency, at all light, how the emissions are going to be structured. So it's built in there, and we are using the VSR plugin in Realms.
Got you. Okay. So a little while back, you mentioned that there was this sort of giant behemoth. It was like the David versus Goliath. I guess that you were referring to Lido in that comparison.
Yeah.
So let's like take that sort of smooth segue over to Lido, because this has been a really current topic on the Ethereum side of the pond. From what I last heard, Lido was actually going to be shutting up shop on Solana, or definitely stopping having emissions. So it seems like they're kind of not looking to, they're no longer as much of a giant concern for you, at least on Solana. But let's chat about Lido, the Lido centralization topic on Ethereum. As you mentioned towards the beginning of our chat, the dynamics or the mechanics of staking on Ethereum are very different to Solana. You had to initially have 32 ETH. You had to be running the validator. It was a lot more complex and required a much, much larger sort of entry cost, which has led to, I'm setting the stage here a little bit, which has led to the very, very, very high success of Lido and a few other LST providers. And can you, introduce this topic to the community, speak a bit about the centralization risk, and also if you can also cover with regard to Lido, like how much of Ethereum is actually liquid staked versus Solana?
Right. So do my best to get the numbers right. I'm not super familiar with the ETH situation today, but I think the last time I looked at it, there was about like 25% of all ETH staked, of which Lido hovers around 30%. So I think that they are about 8 or 10% in total of all ETH to be staked with Lido. I believe that, yeah, they are hovering around this 33% critical threshold that everybody talks about on ETH for Lido not to cross it. Because just like I was saying, on Solana, these 30 biggest validators that together have 33% of all SOL stake, those are called super minority group, and it's a group that collectively can hold the network. Because for Solana to keep on running, you need at least 2/3 of all staked weighted nodes to be agreeing on the transactions on the state. If you don't have this 1/3, so if this 1/3 would collude and would go offline, then Solana would hold. That's why also Marinade stakes to the smaller ones. So that's why they're talking about this 33% critical threshold on Ethereum, and I believe that Lido is quite close to making it. As I'm aware, there were some self-limiting proposals previously. So there was a vote that Lido should not get more than this 33%, that they can limit it at the protocol level of Lido, that they would just not get additional ETH in the protocol. The DAO rejected, so it failed. It did not pass this proposal. And I think ultimately it shows that the whole adoption. So once again, if we're talking, say, 25 or 30% of ETH to be staked, it's way lower than Solana, right? At the same time, ETH is in this transition from this proof of work to proof of stake. So it's not been a long time ago when like this wasn't happening at all on ETH, and you could not withdraw your ETH. That's all this made it super easy and super familiar for the users on ETH to be staking with liquid staking protocols. I'm glad personally to see more of the options today on ETH, even though I would expect the other protocols beyond Lido to be much more aggressive, to be just better with the marketing, to do some incentive program, to do some vampire attack. It seems that nothing is going on in there, and it's this dominant player out there on ETH, which in the long run might not be the best play. At the same time, I feel that the power of Ethereum community, they are talking about it. It's a topic, so they're addressing the possible concern, and I feel that they can still do something about it. At the same time, they might much likely cross it in the long run, Lido the threshold, and then once again, it'll be on the protocol and the community how they go about it. But we will see how this all evolve. I think
it's a strange scenario because it's really the case that Lido is almost a victim of their own success. Like they've been so successful that now they actually present a risk to the network, which is, I suppose, the only corollary I can think of is maybe the big miners in BTC, which also kind of were so successful that they then actually kind of, in a sense, harmed the perception of decentralization of the network. Okay, so let's move on. Let's refocus then back onto Solana, of course, and the LST landscape on Solana. You mentioned when you were introducing Marinade that in the beginning it was pretty much just you guys. You took the concept from Polkadot, but if we look at 2023, late 2023 now, it's not just you guys. There's quite a few different flavors of competitor. So can you speak a little bit about like the competitor landscape and I guess how you see things playing out with regard to LSTs in the next, say, month or 6 months or so?
Sure. Yeah. So at the moment, I don't even know if I count them all, but definitely when we started, there was Marinade, and the month later there was Lido, and everybody said this is going to be the big race between these two, right? The Solana native guys, the underdogs, the community guys that made it, that bootstrapped those Marinade folks. And then Lido coming with this huge treasury, they might just roll them over because they know how it's done on ETH. They will just replicate it and do the same on Solana. It doesn't matter. And so that was, I would say, 80% of the market share was and still is between Marinade and this ETH giant Lido coming to Solana, and now actually shutting down because it doesn't make economical sense for them to keep it going. And I think even the focus back to ETH, where the most of it is happening, I think it's a reasonable way to do it. And then we have like multiple minor LSTs in the ecosystem representing specific groups or segments, I would call it. So we have, say, the DAO Sol, right, that represents the stake on those DAO operated communities. We have this Lane Sol, Cogent Sol, which are the staked Sol tokens that represent a specific validator stake. So those are usually the high performant validators that wanted to have an alternative, a liquid alternative for their stakers. So they released this staked Sol, which represents the delegated Sol only to them only. So it's not like Marinade where you would have 100 of validators set, but it's a single validator, but very performant one, but you can be liquid at the same time. And then you have the Jito Sol. So that's like a specific client. So they only support the Jito client, right? They would not stake anything outside of this specific client. So you have these different segments around supporting like different clusters of the network. So it all works together. It's all great. With Lido, actually, it used to be almost the exact of Marinade. So they would stake to the biggest well-known validators, but to the biggest ones, relying on those like VIP validator set. While with Marinade, it was algorithmically driven and rather the medium and smaller ones. So we think of those LSTs, they are like great, supporting different use cases on Solana, different sectors, so that the community have a choice, and that's great, right? And we believe that Marinade trying to be like the umbrella above them all, and Marinade does not favor a specific client. Marinade does not favor the huge, well-known validators. Marinade does not favor the DAO-oriented communities or a single validator. Marinade basically goes where the best yield is, with some factor of the decentralization and trying to spread the stake around. So that's how we're thinking about really the core value of where AMSOL stands out, which I believe that's like the core topic and the differentiation in the LST ecosystem, in the LST industry. Still, yeah, that's why we launched Marinade Native, to be in the blue ocean again. So from this 2% liquid staking market, for us to leverage into 50 times bigger market. So with Marinade Native, we build it to have some leverage, to have some impact, and to get into this 8 billion market, which is native staking, and to deliver on our values, on our objectives there with the regular staking. So how much respect I have for the LST ecosystem and for people doing great job in there. The waters are like uncharted. It's untapped, the market, with much more to get on the native staking, which is exactly where we're going, exactly where we see the Marinade's recent growth.
That's a really interesting way. I hadn't considered it like that, where the LSTs are not necessarily competing because they perform sort of different functions or different. They're having different goals. And as you said, the pie is actually, it's not really necessarily competing directly with other LSTs. It's actually getting
right.
The native stake is really the enemy here, or the one that needs to be onboarded into LSTs or more diversified staking. So then, speaking about Blue Ocean, and then we'll wrap up. What's coming next for Marinade?
Right. So yeah, we have this like exciting thing that we are about to roll out this quarter. So I don't want to talk what's coming in 2-3 years, because that's just almost never in crypto. But this quarter we are about to roll out, which is something super specific to Solana and will help all the stakers at large. So I can give you like some hints, but at the moment, once again, if you stake with a specific validator, you have no guarantee at all that they will deliver on their promise, right? If you choose a validator, it says, okay, it's 8% yield, but nobody guarantees it. Tomorrow, once again, they can go offline or change commission, and from this advertised 8%, it's 0% for that specific day. So unless you realize yourself, then you're getting nothing at all. This is less of a concern for Marinade since it stakes to 100 validators, but it still happens. Since we don't know the validators and the validator set Marinade stakes to is completely permissionless. So that means nobody needs to shake hands with Marinade. You need to spin up your own validator. You need to keep it running. And if it's performant and it's up there for 30 days, you are automatically staked. As long as there is reasonable commission and so on, you are staked just automatically. So it happens at times where the validator would, quote unquote, rag Marinade. They would change commission to 100%, for example, or they just go offline. And we suffer, not a lot, but we still suffer some yield loss from those malperforming validators. So what we are about to roll out is a system, a skin in the game system, so that the validators for the first time will have some collateral, some deposit in the system, and they will basically subscribe to some certain, we can call it like service level agreements. They need to behave, they need to perform. If they don't conform to the rules, they will be penalized, so that the yield that Marinade provides for the stakers is protected at all expenses at all times, so that even if the validator goes down or is not performing, Marinade would have a way to protect the users, to protect the stakers. And this is especially a big concern for the bigger funds and institutions that we're talking to today. They would love to see some insurance, some guaranteed yield, they call it, because our set is unknown. And that's why the bigger institutions end up staking on some big known validators, like the big OGs in the space. So this is another level of protection and another level of delivering the best product that we can, so that from now on, Marinade will not only stake the diversified and decentralized way, but it will also protect the yield at all costs for the stakers, for the best of the users, which is something we are super excited about to roll out by the end of this year.
Yeah, that sounds super cool. I think we're close to hitting an hour here, so we're way over time.
Yeah.
I think this has been a really great summary of like a really great introduction to LSTs, to Marinade, to the ecosystem. So I think, if you're new to LSTs, I hope this has been a super helpful episode. It's been a pleasure to have you on, Michael. I'll be keen to have Marinade on again next year and see where things are at, and also excited to see how things develop with Fire Dancer, with the new things that you're rolling out. It's a very exciting space right now to be in regards to LSTs.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. This was super fun. And yeah, let's get it going.
Nice.